Assalamualaikum and good morning. I bid to everyone present here, the honored judges, fellow conference members, and everyone else listening. We are all gathered here today to discuss about the current situation of Castor. But before everything else, please calm down. We all know that Castor is in ruins. We all know that the virus is spreading and more economical problems in Castor. So, before anything else, let me shed a bit of light about what's happening in Castor. There are multiple problems that are currently happening in Castor. To specify to you, Castor is facing its worst now. So, I'll be structurizing my speech. Firstly, we will clarify about what our priorities are in our policies. Secondly, I will state what the policies are going to be. And thirdly, how we will structurize the process of tackling the problems that we are currently facing. So, let me clarify to you that our main focus now is on tackling the virus for the benefit of all people. Secondly, it will be to maintain the peace and among citizens and keeping the current status quo situation as it is for the benefit of everyone else. Thirdly, it will be to replenish the environment and infrastructural damage after the tsunami. And lastly, to maintain the economy of our country as a whole. So let me just repeat that again. Firstly, it will be on tackling the virus. Secondly, maintaining the peace of the citizens. Thirdly, the infrastructure and environment. And lastly, the economy. So our side will be proposing three main policies, which will of course have their own divisions according to the problems at hand, which are firstly, healthcare, secondly, welfare, followed by law enforcement and international relations. So our main policies are going to be, first, the policies that will be reinstated before the pandemic starts to rapidly spread. Secondly, during the pandemic itself. And thirdly, post-pandemic, what our policies are going to be to make sure our country is at its best after the pandemic. So I'll immediately jump towards what our first policy is going to be about. So firstly, on tackling the virus problem, the IMPF 31 virus. The government will be focused on catering towards the virus. Workers will begin to work at home little by little. Companies must provide a living space for essential workers to live in, especially those with far distances from their workplace and their homes. Essential workers are allowed to exit their homes. However, only this includes workers in the economic sector, the healthcare sector, and the law enforcement sector. Other workers who work from home, such as teachers and other jobs. As the virus is zoonotic, the selling of meat is more prohibited, except from sources that are guaranteed to be IMPF 31 clear by the government, meaning that it will make sure that the food sent to the people are in its best condition. Instead, more fruits and vegetables are going to be supplied as an alternative to replace the lack of supply of meat. This means that we will be reinforcing more greenery to replace meat as a whole. Stray animals such as cats, dogs, rodents, and mice will be caught by patrollers that will be constantly on duty periodically. Masks and sanitation services are compulsory, especially in all public areas such as the toilets, the hospitals, and the restaurants. So, of course, in a pandemic, there will be multiple volunteers that will be coming out to help the government. So, what will these volunteers do? These volunteers will help work in the medical departments, however, not in the hospital. They'll be the ones who will be reading the temperatures of the citizens in the neighborhoods. So, this will allow more doctors and nurses to cater towards patients who are already positive of IMPF 31 virus. Frontliners in the medical sector are more prioritized towards the frontliners in the military sector and other sectors as well, meaning that we will cater towards the prevention of the virus as our main priority. We will also close the borders and imports to avoid more imported cases from happening, which will increase the amount of cases in our country. This is following our president's. This is against our former president's recent change, in which he stated that we will be opening our borders to other countries as well. We will be putting that to a halt first, as we think that it's more important to keep our citizens as cheap as we can instead of increasing the economy. The technology will be updated to allow maximum curing efficiency of the virus, especially in hospitals, such as the usage of ventilators and multiple hospital equipment as well. Schools are also closed and classes shall be carried out online by the teachers. So, carrying on with my next point, on catering towards the economic crisis, at the same time the IMPF31 virus, both at once. Rebuilding and renovating only for essentially damaged buildings such as hospitals and rehabilitation centers, mainly those that are damaged during the tsunami itself. This includes refugee camps to be built for victims of the tsunami who are rendered homeless now. We will be focusing on that as well. Fishing facilities on shores will slowly be built around cluster to increase the efficiency of fishing and for economical gain as well. Overpopulation shall be catered by providing better education about birth control, such as the usage of vasectomy and contraception as an alternative to the citizens. We will also implement more self-defense lessons in prevention towards more rape cases from occurring. So allow me to state our three main pillars to cater towards overpopulation. Firstly, education. Secondly, birth control, and lastly, healthcare. So to cater towards the economic crisis before the pandemic, our country will attempt to initiate more international relations with other countries to collaborate with them in effort of finding the cure faster. This includes the sharing of more information about IMPF31 virus, and secondly, the sharing of more materials to cater towards the citizens. Funds are also given towards the rural areas for urbanization of public services and the welfare of the people. More rural areas will have internal tourism, and exploiting of more forest goods shall become a minor source of economy, which has not been done before in the country, and we think that that has very high potential as well. Lastly, special ops and patrols will be carrying out the national service as more daily routine patrols will be occurring day by day. This is to ensure that the situation at hand doesn't go haywire and the citizens don't make more protests. We will only be in debt to countries to borrow funding for the replenishing of the country. What do I mean by trusted countries? By stating the word trusted countries, we are focusing on countries that will not bring any harm towards the country whatsoever, meaning that they are stable, they have a stable economy, they don't have overpopulation. At the same time, their situation with the pandemic, they are still rendered unaffected by the pandemic. This is again an extension of Asian ASEAN policy in changing the norm from being an isolated country into being a more open country as a whole. Carrying on with the second policy, which is the policies that will be implemented during the pandemic itself. So, firstly, the IMPF31 virus policies. So, let me just state this. Let me just clarify that all the policies that will be stated before the pandemic itself will still be implemented during the pandemic. However, they will be more strict and more tightened as well. This includes the education, such as awareness campaigns to explain more about the virus as a whole. More classes shall also be held online at home. It can't be denied that rise of traditionalism is also occurring. In addition to that, we will also give awareness about the dire effects of traditional medicine as a whole, and at the same time presenting the pros and benefits to modern medication. To clarify that we are not going to ban traditional medicine because we believe that there are also benefits towards traditional medicine as a whole. However, we are only discouraging it if we think there are more harms than goods. Only government licensed doctors are allowed to carry out this medical treatment. This form of traditional medical treatment, they must have a certain standard, doctorate, and a strong educational background behind them to support them. So, the drug war. Besides that, drug addicts and drug dealers shall be executed, however, only based upon the usage and health amount during the period of time. Rehabilitation centers are open for drug addicts, however, execution will be carried out for incurable cases or multiple incidents of drug usage, meaning that the form of rehabilitation does not work on them anymore. Okay, carrying on, the economic crisis and economic activities. To cater towards the economic crisis, the economic activities will be continued, however, must be accordance towards the SOP of the policy for the IMPF31 virus, as I have stated before. This is because they will be providing for the citizens in other ways. Only internal tourism shall be allowed as a security measure between borders, which will be tightened as well. Fishing and harvesting areas will expand as a main source of economy, but at a slower rate to make sure that the country doesn't go bankrupt and be more in debt. International relations will be carried out with uninfected countries only to prevent the chance of more imported cases from happening. So, carrying on, the percentage of a certain percentage of produce that has been obtained by fishing, by exploiting forest goods, shall be exported. However, only when certain conditions have been made. These conditions include a stable economy, a stable food supply for the citizens. But carrying on, urbanization shall also occur. However, it will occur by giving equal treatment to all citizens in every background, in every area. No form of biasness shall occur in any citizen to win the hearts of all people and leave a good impression on the government. So, meaning that if you have a high stature, if you are a minister even, we will assume that all punishments given to you will be the same as giving punishments towards even homeless people. Overcrowded jails. In jails, all punishments will be based on how intense your crimes are and the frequency of the crime given, of the crime done. For example, major cases may have a higher chance of getting executed compared to minor cases. By stating major cases, what do I mean by that? Major cases include killing, include the spreading of drugs, including breaking the rules of the SOP given. However, the minor crimes include petty theft and other minor crimes. So, people who repeat crimes over and over again shall also be executed as a form of punishment, because we believe that the punishment that they have set on now, the sending to the rehabilitation and jailing them, does not work on the patient anymore. It isn't effective, thus you shouldn't be doing it anymore. The influx of illegal immigrants shall also be catered to. Security will be tightened, especially amongst borders, to prevent the entry of illegal immigrants from entering, which may already have the virus in the first place. Security aquatic borders will be closed into the country, and imports shall be at a stop. Posting multiple security checks will be done in the seaside and the shores of Castor. The last problem at hand that will be tackled during the pandemic itself will be human trafficking. To cater to human trafficking, the masterminds of the operations shall be executed with no compromisation. So, immigrants will be deported back into the original countries. Patrollers on duty shall scout and question mischievous activities done by citizens which don't follow the SOP. Thirdly, after the pandemic, what will happen? What were the policies that will be implemented after the pandemic? So, to be clear, all the activities before and during the pandemic will still be continued after the pandemic. However, at a slower rate compared to before. Overpopulation. More options for contraception will still be applicable. This is because the hospitals are now reduced in the terms of cases in IMPF31, meaning that they have more room for other medical conditions to be catered to as well. Each household may only hold up to 5 people maximum, and each family can have only a maximum amount of 2 children each. This is to limit the increase in children in the country. Economic crisis. How will we cater this? Having a nuclear power plant, the uranium fuel obtained shall become a source of firepower or military. Some will be exported as a marketing strategy to obtain more international relations with other countries as well, due to its high demand, even amongst first world countries, even amongst high-tier countries. External tourism will continue as more international relations have already been formed. As I said before, we'll be sending out these letters to make international relations, and we think that it will be already accepted by the time the pandemic ends. Urbanization. The development of rural areas shall continue from its halt during the pandemic. So meaning that all the urbanization shall continue again. Exploitation of economic resources in rural areas shall also continue, such as the exploiting of forest goods and tourism. Certain rural areas shall be urbanized for economical purposes. Firstly, internal and external tourism. Secondly, the increase in the amount of tourists that may enter the country. And thirdly, the opening of more job opportunities for the citizens as well. As a reward, in the case that all sources of revenue increase, doubles, economic crisis ends, the pandemic itself ends, then taxing to all citizens Sorry for the slight inconvenience before this. So, continue with my points. For the final policy in the urbanization, to cater towards urbanization, we will urge all people to obey with the pandemic itself by giving them awards, such as if all sources of revenue increase and doubles, economic crisis ends and the pandemic itself ends. Then taxing towards all citizens may end, but only for a short period, but only for the period of time. Overcrowded jails. Rehabilitation centers are also continued to be built and updated at the same time. So, regarding about the issue about territorial segregation, bear in mind that I didn't mention this once in my speech. This is because we are not sure if Dagen wants to exit our country or not. But assuming that Dagen wants to exit our country, we may allow it. However, they must obey with our following conditions. Firstly, nuclear power plants and ports shall be shared amongst countries between Dagen and Castor. A large portion of illegal immigrants in Castor are sent to Dagen. However, not all of them are. People in Dagen people of Dagen who may want to enter Castor shall go to the standard immigration procedure between borders, meaning that we will, even though our distance is close, we will still be assuming that they are a separate country already. So, the departure of illegal immigrants to Dagen occurs after both countries are at a stable condition economically, financially, and lastly, the pandemic itself is already stable. So, however, the disadvantages towards Dagen, in which I state that a certain portion of immigrants are sent, shall be explained last during a conference with them. Of course, the policies implemented are according to suitability of the conditions and the status quo and may alter from time to time. So, we believe that there are three situations in which the policies will be altered from time to time in three unpredictable variables that we have to face. Firstly, the duration of the pandemic is shorter than what we actually expected. Then, the stabilizing of the economy shall be boosted in front of schedule, ahead of schedule, to be more focused along with the catering of the virus at hand. So meaning that both problems shall be arranged, shall be overcome at once. Secondly, the duration of the pandemic is as expected, in which we will carry out the original plan procedures of the policies. Thirdly, the duration of the pandemic is longer than what we expected. So in this case, this is the worst case scenario. The stabilizing of the economy shall be catered to, however, slower than what the policies have already stated, to ensure that the country doesn't go bankrupt, to ensure the country doesn't need to rely on other countries obtaining more debt and more debt and more debt. In this case, healthcare must be prioritized first with no exception whatsoever. So certain policies which will be implemented little by little to ensure the chaos doesn't go rampant, doesn't expand, doesn't go beyond our control. Most of the policies that are implemented little by little will cater to the balancing of the economy and the production of produce in source of food and a source of income to the country. In our point of view, our policies will cater towards all the problems of the country in chronological order while maintaining the trust and winning the hearts of the people as a whole. With that, we stand our case, and I invite my member to answer your questions.
I here as the Deputy Prime Minister of Castor, am ready to answer your question. Any questions can be asked in the comments below. Feel free to ask whatever to your heart's content. Yes, there is a question.
First question, how can having a collaborative effect on finding the cure of IMPF-21 in other countries help our economy?
Okay, so as the question asks, how does the collaborative effort of finding a cure to this virus help the economy? Well, firstly, it actually helps by finding the cure earlier. It helps to reduce the strain of the virus on top of the economy, because as we know, the virus is taking a toll on our markets and it's also decreasing our revenue. So the faster we can find this cure, the quicker we can actually lift this restrictive virus and thus recover the economy much more faster. Next question. And let's see. Any questions? Continuing on my first question just now, so the simplified version of it is that the quicker you get to eradicate this virus, the earlier can you recover our economy and thus get our markets running again.
Second question, don't you think that the execution method you proposed earlier is a bit too inhumane?
Well, sure. We here at the government of Castor, believe in equal human rights because we already signed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But we must see here that there's an important factor, because the absence of the execution method might potentially be the factor that is driving the increasing cases in drug addicts, maybe murder, maybe all these big crimes that only result in years of imprisonment. That's why here, we at the government of Castor believe that if we implement this execution method, we can mentally drive them to not repeat the crimes again. Because what we want from the execution method is not to pointlessly kill off our citizens. We want what the desired effect from our execution method is to make the criminals less tempted to repeat the same offences again.
Carrying on with the third question, regarding the policy to give harsher punishments to offenders, would that not only increase the number of people and length of their stay in prisons?
That's why as the question says, that is why we also opt to have rehabilitation and execution, because the more offences that have execution, thus the lower number of people who go to prison. And rehabs, especially for drug cases, considering there is a drug war in our country, can also help to reduce the strains of people going into prison. Because in large proportion, people who committed drug offences will be transmitted to these rehab centres, and thus reducing the strain on our prisons.
Next question. What can our citizens do to keep us all safe?
But there's only one simple thing to do: help the government by following the SOPs. Because as you know, this virus has a high infectivity rate, such as the virus of COVID-19 that occurred in 2020. So, if you as a citizen can help us, the government, actually follow the SOPs and stay at home, it will be a great help to the government over here.
I assume last question. Considering Castor's bad diplomatic reputation, what are your initiatives to improve its image?
Well, one of our initiatives to improve this image is to actually try to strike trade deals with other countries, because as you know, most of a majority of the international diplomacy that occurs in this world is through trading. For example, like just now we said we would like to trade our depleted uranium to make ammunitions and other military products. We can strike a deal with maybe other countries, so that in return we can get other natural resources from them. And another initiative is to also send foreign aid to other countries that are in trouble.
Okay. The next problem. There are some more questions.
Okay, and with that ends our Q&A session. I would like to big thank you to all who are asking questions. Your questions were all very fun to answer. And with that, I end this Q&A session. Thank you very much.